All right, good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Sandy Carter, and I'm Vice President of Enterprise Workloads with AWS, or Amazon Web Services. And
I'm Kit Colbert. I'm the CTO for our cloud platform business at VMware.
and I thought I'd give a couple of really fun facts. How many of you guys know vMotion? vMotion?
A lot of people.
This is the father of vMotion. It's like one of, yeah, right?
She's embarrassing me here.
One of my very favorite things about VMware. So we'll get started here in just a couple minutes with what we're going to do. And I will kind of give our agenda here in a second. If that's
Okay, yeah, you take over. I'll be back.
Cool? Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay, well, super. Well, we're going to talk about VMware Cloud on AWS. How many of you guys heard about this before the show today? How many of you knew about it? Okay, that's great. How many of you guys are considering VMware Cloud on AWS for meeting a hybrid cloud need? How many for disaster recovery? Okay, and how many for migration? How many don't know? You're just here. Okay, great. Okay, that's good. I like that. I like that. Well, let me see here. See if I can work this. There we go. So, you know, I was walking outside today before it started raining. Well, first of all, I wore red. Did you guys notice that everybody here was in red? So all day long, people have been stopping me, asking me questions. Can you tell me where the bathroom is? Can you tell me where the session is? So I've been trying to help people. But I was also walking down the street in New York when it was sunny, when it wasn't raining, with Kit. And as we were walking down the street, Kit saw a bottle on the ground. So he reached down and he picked it up, and he rubbed it, and out popped a genie. Well, this is a true story. And the genie said to Kit, Kit, this is your lucky day. Not only do you get to present today at the AWS Summit, but you get 3 wishes. But you know, every good thing comes with a little catch every once in a while. So the genie told Kit that whatever he wished for, his evil arch enemy got double. So Kit said, okay, well, I'll take you up on that. So Kit wished for a beautiful house in California. So poof, he got this beautiful house in California, but his evil arch enemy got 2. So next he wished for a Tesla, because who doesn't want a red Tesla? So he got this beautiful red Tesla, but poof, his evil arch enemy got 2. So for his third and his final wish, he said, genie, scare me half to death. Glad we got some engineers in here. So what does that have to do with today's session? Well, I have 3 wishes from the session today. Wish number 1 is that you understand what VMware Cloud on AWS is. Number 2, I want to walk you through the top use cases. You know, Amazon has this process of working backwards from the customer, and that's exactly what we did here for the solution as well. We always start with what the customer's needs are, so I want to start talking to you about that. I will cover those 2 sections in maybe 15 minutes right at the beginning, and then Kit's going to come back on stage and talk about how VMware Cloud on AWS works and what are some of the new things inside of it. So that will be my 3rd wish, is that you get all 3 of those. Okay, is that a deal? Wish 1, 2, and 3. So just as you guys, you know, when we started talking, you guys told me some of the reasons why you're considering VMware Cloud on AWS. And we did a lot of research. As I said, Amazon likes to work backwards from the customer to try to determine what was really needed. And as we started looking at our solutions, we found that about 64% of companies are really considering VMware Cloud on AWS, primarily for a hybrid cloud solution to help them with migrations, to help them with disaster recovery. 65% of companies today will start with a hybrid cloud strategy. Some of them will consider that the end of their journey, but most will consider that a stepping stone in their journey on the way to the cloud. There are about 70 million VMs, and most of those today are running Microsoft applications. So 70 million VMs that are out there today that customers want to get and move into the cloud. So this customer demand and this interest was really driven from doing a lot of different research with analysts and with our customers as we were moving forward.
Now, some of the working backwards really involve looking at what are some of the hybrid cloud challenges that exist today in the marketplace. So if you think about hybrid cloud, some of the things that companies like yourselves are really dealing with are things like, can I have a common tool set or set of skills? In fact, this morning I had breakfast at 7 a.m. with a large financial institution, and he said to me, Sandy, on my journey, my number one thing is that I protect the skills of my team. Can they leverage VMware? Can they leverage .NET? Can they leverage AWS? These are the things that are really important to me because I really can't spend a lot of time retraining everybody. The other big issue that comes up a lot, especially here in New York with financial services companies or healthcare companies, biotech, is how do I do the management and the security? Security is really important. I want to make sure I have a great security framework that's set up for whatever hybrid cloud solution that I choose. And then we hear a lot about enterprise class SLA. So today I was actually with a customer who brought 100 people to the session, the summit today, and their number one request in hybrid cloud is, can I get an enterprise level service level agreement? It has to work, and it has to meet certain levels, whether that might be, an hour RTO. I have to have these enterprise level agreements that are set. And then, of course, I have to have compatibility with other applications. And so as we worked backwards from the customer, looked at what you guys needed, what some of the challenges were today, we as Amazon decided to partner with VMware to create VMware Cloud on AWS. Now, this partnership is not just a partnership on a paper napkin, and it's not just a bunch of marketing brochures. I think what's really important about this partnership is that it's truly joint engineering. In fact, some of you may have read Kit's article recently where he talked about how it was really hard work getting the integration of the two systems together, right, Kit? And I think that's really important and really valuable because VMware and AWS have done that hard engineering work. That means that a lot of the things that you're looking for are going to be easier for you. So because it took us all that time, and it is that hard, for you, it's going to be much easier. So as we join together to do this joint engineering to deliver the best of the private cloud, which VMware has today, with the public cloud, which is what AWS has today, we really wanted to develop this great solution that could meet all those needs and all those challenges that we just talked about that were out there around the hybrid cloud. So let me show you at a high level what the solution looks like. Now, if you take a look at VMware Cloud on AWS, I think some of the really interesting things about it are the ability to run, manage, and secure applications seamlessly. You don't have to buy new hardware. You don't have to rewrite your application or refactor. And you don't have to modify your operating model. And for me, those are three really critical things that we started with at the very beginning that was at the heart of the solution. In addition, because you've got familiar skills and tools that run across the solution, you also don't have to do retraining. You're going to be built on AWS, bare metal. You're going to use and leverage VMware as well. Another, I think, big value proposition. And then you've got a lot of flexibility in how you want to choose to use this. So if you go to the middle box there where you see VMware Cloud on AWS, you see what we've done is we've integrated in compute, storage, and networking. So vSphere for compute, vSAN for storage, and NSX for networking. And that is integrated in with vCenter, which makes that management and that control, all the things that you as customers told us you needed in a hybrid solution, makes that all that available to you to use and leverage. And then, of course, you'll see that this is built on top of AWS on bare metal, so you get access to all of those AWS services. So let's say that you wanted to use this for disaster recovery. You can easily link into S3, for instance. You could link into RDS. Essentially, any of the AWS services that you would want to integrate into your solution, you can do that and leverage that across the board. So this rapid time to spin up a SDDC, software-defined data center, being able to leverage the same management and control, not having to buy new hardware, not having to refactor your applications, not having to change your operating model. These are some of the tenets that we leverage to build this particular solution. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So let me talk a little bit then about some of the use cases that we planned for ahead of time, and then a new use case that you guys have told us that you're starting to use today a lot. Kit will talk a little bit more about it, but I'll frame that out as well. So these are the use cases that we found were the most prevalent ones. This is even before we built the solution, that are still valid today. So the first one, I think, is a really big one even today, and this is around data center extension. So any of you guys have to do a data center evacuation? Yep. So we hear that a lot. We actually had, in fact, it might be relevant today, we had one customer who had to evacuate their data center because it was flooded, completely flooded, and they had to move in a weekend. Might happen in New York City after the rain today. How many of you guys are looking for a place maybe to do dev and test? Or even just to expand your footprint? So this is kind of the first set of use cases that we were looking at, that you wanted to be able to provision extra capacity. You might have capacity constraints on premises, and you needed to be able to handle that in a particular way. You may have some sort of geographic capacity needs that you need to address, or you have that need for doing some sort of dev and test environment in what you're trying to build out that has to be similar to what you do on premises. This was the first use case that we felt, based on all the knowledge that we had, that would be prevalent. And guess what? It was very much used by some of our customers. One of these is PHH Mortgage. You guys know them? They're actually here in New Jersey. Anybody know them or familiar with them? Are they in the audience by chance? No? Okay. So PHH is one of the larger providers of mortgage services. They're, as I said, based in New Jersey. They do a lot of small banks, and they look at the end-to-end workflow for mortgage for small banks, but they also do some very big banks too, like JP Morgan Chase or even HSBC. And one of the big things that they were looking at was how could they really manage their data center expansion and extend that out. And this was really important to them because they had run out of capacity and they had limited new funding. I don't know how many of you have experienced that, but they had limited new funding. And so what they were really looking to do is to extend that data center, maybe not do a complete data center evacuation, but really extend that data center and what they were looking at. Oops. Let's see here. I don't know exactly how I did that. It's kind of magic, I think. I'm sorry. Oh wait, here comes my. So how did I do that so I don't do it again? It froze? Okay. So while he's trying to get the charts back up, one of the things that PHH Mortgage wanted to do was they had 350 VMs, and they needed to rapidly migrate those over, and they gave us 3 days to do it in. And so we were able to migrate those VMs over in 3 days. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about fast migration. They were able to maintain that same environment that they started with minimum changes, and they were able to really greatly reduce their CapEx. So this first area, this first use case that we're talking about is really around extending that data center, making sure that if you have to do an evacuation, you can do it quickly, that you can do it with lower cost, and that you can really make the right changes, make the right modifications that you need to do, and do that really rapidly. So our second big use case that we really had started on was disaster recovery. Now, this was really interesting because I've actually talked to 2 or 3 companies today who are looking for a way to modernize their disaster recovery, a way to complement what they're currently doing, complement their current existing data center and data recovery strategy, and to implement it with a cloud-like structure. And so I thought this was really interesting because at first, our very first customer was looking to do disaster recovery. And this was Scribbs Network. You guys may know them. They do the Food Network. They do a History Channel. And they were recently purchased by Discovery for lots of money, billions and billions of dollars. So our very first customer that we had jointly was Scribbs, which is now Discovery. And one of the things that they found was that they really wanted to upgrade their on-premises disaster recovery system. They wanted to be more scalable, and they wanted to build it out in the cloud. That was really their requirement. And they wanted to do this very quickly. I thought this was really interesting because they leveraged the solution, VMware Cloud on AWS, to do that. But they also looked at site recovery from VM, as well as a Veritas solution that we integrated in. So we had several of our ISV solutions that came in on top of that as well. Now, the interesting thing here was when they piloted it, they had a couple of requirements for us. They wanted to do RTO in an hour, and they wanted to be able to do RPO in 5 minutes, 5 to 15 minutes, which was a big challenge, right? And we were able to achieve that end-to-end failover time in 12 minutes for RTO, and we did it with 17 VMs. We did it for SQL Server, which is another one of the enterprise databases that I often migrate over, and with Citrix as well. So this was a really interesting case, and if you want to see Scribbs Network or Discovery tell the story for themselves, there's a great YouTube video that you should go and watch as their VP of Infrastructure and Operations talks about the challenges that he had around disaster recovery and what he was looking for. So our third use case, so we talked about our data center migration, disaster recovery, and the third use case that we built this for was around cloud migrations. So you might want to do some sort of application-specific migration as you're moving something over, do something data center-wide, or just completely refresh your entire infrastructure. And one of my favorite customers was a customer who liked this use case, and that was Black Mountain. They're based out of San Diego, and they do a lot of investment banking. So they optimize with data investment strategies for their customers. So because they had a lot of data, one of the things that they wanted to do is they had a contract that was expiring with Rackspace, and they wanted to be able to migrate over, but they did not want to re-platform. So that was part of their requirements. They also needed to do this quickly, as you can notice a theme here for all of our customers. And we were able, with our VMware Cloud on AWS solution, to use HCX in order to do that. Now, how many of you guys are familiar with HCX? Okay, maybe 1 or 2. Hopefully all the VMware people will raise their hand too. But HCX, I think, is really powerful because it enables you, without changing configuration, without changing your application, to be able to move workloads from on-premises to the cloud. If you haven't looked at it, you definitely want to look at it. I think it's a valuable part of this solution. So they wanted to do this for production level workloads. So this is not just for disaster recovery, but also for what we're doing in production. So here again, you can see because of all the data, they had 30 terabytes of data. They migrated over 400 VMs, and they did this all in 20 days. And were able to get this up and going without switching any backup vendor and making any changes. I think this is a really powerful story that just shows you that the tenets with which we built this with, making sure this was easy, not having to buy new hardware, not having to get new skills, not having to refactor, we held true to all of those tenets. Now let me show you the new use case that you guys have come up with to us, and that's around these next generation apps. And what I'm really excited about, and Kit will talk a little bit about, is this enterprise workload. So how do I bring over SQL? How do I bring over Oracle? How do I bring over these enterprise applications? How do I do that in the right way with VMware Cloud on AWS? So these are our 4 use cases. I would love to hear from you guys too as you start using it or consider it. Like, what other use cases do you have in mind so that we can continually build for you as well? Because that's what we love to do at Amazon. We love to hear what you're doing and how we can make it easier and better for you. So we do have hundreds of customers, but we do have 25 or so new customers that have just released. We're actually releasing a blog as Kit and I speak today on these new customers who are now using it. I'll pick out a couple just to highlight real quickly. MIT, which actually is not on the slide because we're not allowed to use their logo, but we can talk about what they're doing. I think is a really interesting story. They had 300 VMs they needed to get over. They had a situation where they had to get out of the data center, and they did that in 96 hours. They were so excited about it, they presented at the public summit, so just like we have this summit here in New York City, down in DC, and they were so excited about the solution that we actually had another educational institution agree and sign up to the solution during their presentation. That's how passionate they were about what we were able to accomplish with them. Another one on here, if you're from outside the US, is Otto. Otto is a big e-commerce platform. They're based out of Germany and France. They're available in 20 different countries. They also had very similar requirements. They needed to migrate with speed. They wanted to move very quickly, and they were able to do that with the VMware Cloud. So what I wanted to cover with you is why we did the partnership, that we had an integrated solution. It's actually engineered to work together and to be that best hybrid cloud solution in the marketplace. And I wanted to share with you the use cases and how we thought about this building backwards, working backwards from the customer. So what I'd like to do now is bring up Kit, so Kit can now take you through some of the basics of the service. So please welcome Kit to the stage.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, there we go. Couldn't hear myself, and as a CTO, I have to hear myself talking all the time. That's just kind of how we roll. Okay, so really cool stuff. Tons of excitement across the customer base for VMware Cloud and AWS, and you saw all the use cases. What I want to take you through now is, how does this technology work? What's actually happening behind the scenes, under the covers? So, as Sandy mentioned earlier, what we're talking about here is really delivering the VMware software-defined data center, the SDC, to the cloud running on AWS's bare metal. And so a couple different things here, right? So first and foremost, this is the SDDC that you know and love, right? ESX, vCenter, H5 client, NSX, vSAN, all these capabilities deployed there in the cloud for you. And the other thing about it is that this is bare metal. So again, some folks think, oh, maybe it's on EC2 and some sort of weird nested thing. No. We actually work very closely with AWS to build that bare metal service. And so we can run ESX on, we've customized ESX for it, done a lot of integration work, as Sandy mentioned, to make that all function and work properly. Now, one of the differences between what we're doing here with VMware Cloud and AWS and something like EC2 is that what EC2 does is gives you a virtual machine on a physical host that may be shared by other customers. In fact, most likely is. With VMware Cloud and AWS, each physical host is yours, right? It's only one customer is using it at any given time. And you can put as many VMs on there as you'd like, right? So a default topology for SDDC cluster on VMware Cloud and AWS is 4 hosts, and you can scale up as quickly as you'd like from there. Now, when people look at it, obviously one of the big use cases is hybrid, but I'd like to point out that even before the hybrid use case, VMware Cloud and AWS works perfectly fine if all you have is just VMware Cloud and AWS. Like, let's say you don't even have anything on-prem. It works perfectly fine as it is. However, obviously the real key use case, and something that Sandy was talking about that was common through all those use cases, was how do you connect up what you have on-prem to the cloud? And so, we're doing a lot of work there around connectivity. Some people worry, oh, NSX is running in the cloud. Do I need to have it on-prem? No, you don't, right? You can have NSX in the cloud. You don't need it on-prem. If you have it on-prem, then great. Everything, we can take advantage of that. We can stitch those together. The only thing you really need on-prem is vSphere, right? ESX, vCenter, 6.0, 6.5, 6.7, all those work. And what we can do if you have those more recent versions is actually give you a single pane of glass. So you can log into the cloud, to the H5 client there, and actually see not only the vCenter instances running in the cloud, but also all your vCenter instances on premises, right? So it's pretty cool. You can manage all those very, very consistently. And then, as I said, we can leverage your existing Direct Connect. I didn't say this, but your existing connections, such as Direct Connect, that you may already have into your native AWS environments. We can use that for VMware Cloud and AWS as well to connect from your on-prem to the cloud. Now, Sandy talked about hybrid cloud extension, or HCX, and this is a really powerful technology. You saw how you heard how a couple of customers have been using that to migrate, bulk migrations of workloads from on-prem to the cloud. It's a really powerful capability, and it's something that a lot of customers have been leveraging. You don't have to use it, but it's there in case you'd like to. Let's see, I think that's the basics of the service. Oh, I guess the other thing I should say, by the way, in terms of isolation, so I talked about each host, not only going to one customer. The other thing that we actually do behind the scenes is leverage AWS technologies, things like VPCs. So we handle creating what we call a shadow VPC for you underneath our SDDC. And that thing's, of course, fully locked down, fully isolated, just to your SDDC. We connect it back to VPC running on your native AWS accounts, so you have full connectivity there as well. And that's fully locked down and isolated and secured. So one of the other, probably the most fundamental aspects of this is that the way you consume the SDDC on VMware Cloud and AWS is fundamentally different than how you do it on premises. On premises, you're responsible for installing all the software and managing all the infrastructure software yourself. But in VMware Cloud and AWS, VMware actually handles all those aspects for you. So for provisioning, you don't need to think about how to deploy our software in what order, the best practices, the VVD specifications. You can throw all that out. Now you just call an API. Call an API, and very quickly, about 90 minutes later, you'll have a full SDDC ready to go. And after that, it's just a couple of minutes to add additional hosts, right? So you don't have to think about any of that stuff. Similarly speaking, for operations, no longer is your team tasked with making sure that all the different SDDC components are up and running. Things like NSX or vCenter, all those things are taken care of by the VMware team. We have our engineering team making sure those things are up and running and available, and obviously work very closely with the AWS folks on any sorts of problems that may arise, again, hardware issues or what have you. Final thing is upgrades. So again, there's no need for your team to think about upgrades. As a matter of fact, the whole model is actually quite different. You know that traditionally on premises, we release updates every 12 to 18 months, and those updates have giant version numbers next to them, right? 6.5, 6.7, what have you. Moving to the cloud, we have the opportunity to deliver functionality much, much more quickly to you. And so we actually have cloud releases every 3 months, and sometimes even faster. Right? And so we take care of managing that all for you. So it's super simple. You don't have to think about it. The system's always patched and running to the latest version. Next time a Spectre or Meltdown type issue occurs, very quickly address that. You don't have to worry about it. Right? You have to worry about your applications, but the infrastructure is all taken care of for you. So there's a very fundamentally different approach to it, this notion of consuming the SDDC as a service. And that's another thing that our customers are really loving. This is the simplicity that offers. They can focus just on their workloads. They don't need to worry about the infrastructure. So as Sandy was mentioning, a lot of the key use cases here are about connecting the environments that you have in native AWS, EC2, and the other services with the workloads that you have running within your SDDC. And so, again, a lot of co-engineering work here with AWS to make this all happen, right? So we connect these two VPCs together, the one that we create for the SDDC with the one that you specified of your native AWS account. And so, bingo, you kind of get connectivity between these two sides. So any of the workloads that you provisioned in EC2, those are all now accessible from the SDDC and vice versa. Any of the higher level AWS services, talking about a Redshift or an RDS, what have you, those can now be accessed by your SDDC workloads. So again, the notion here is as you look toward how you're going to evolve your application, you can actually bring all those apps on-prem closer to the new work you're doing within the native AWS services. So some really cool technologies there. And by the way, some people ask, is this like VPC peering or one of these existing technologies? No, we actually created a whole new technology with AWS created it, closely aligned with our work, that allows you to get really high bandwidth, very low latency, no egress charges between these two VPCs, right? So it just works out of the box, very simple. So that's a quick kind of high level of the technology behind it, and there's a whole much more depth we can go into. But what I want to shift gears and focus on is actually what's new. So this service has been around for not quite a year yet, about 9 months, 10 months now, and actually 11 months, I guess. It's almost been a year. And so as I mentioned, every few months, we're doing a new cloud release, releasing new features, new capabilities, sometimes in preview mode, sometimes in full availability mode. And so, the question is, what's new? What have we just released? And so a ton of different things are happening, right? We actually can't even include them all on one slide. So what I wanted to do was kind of highlight some of the ones that we're particularly excited about. And we've categorized this across a few different areas. So first is looking at how do we expand the global infrastructure footprint of VMware Cloud and AWS, our focus on security and compliance, taking advantage of the elasticity of the cloud. This is some really unique things that I'm going to dive into, some pretty cool stuff. Making it easier to get started with VMware Cloud and AWS. And finally, supporting all your applications, server workloads, desktop workloads, mission-critical workloads. So let's walk through each one of these and see what's happening. So, global infrastructure. Like many AWS services, what we decided to do was start out in one region, making sure that worked, prove out the technology, and then expand to many other regions around the world. So we started in Oregon, US West, and expanded to US East, and then London, and most recently, we just enabled Frankfurt. So this is obviously really exciting to a lot of our European customers. They like London, but obviously because of Brexit and so forth, they want to make sure their workloads stay within the European Union. And so a lot of folks, now that Frankfurt's online, are moving workloads there. We've also announced the future availability of both the Sydney region and US GovCloud. So again, a lot of government agencies, public agencies are very excited about that one as well. And this is just the start. Right? Absolutely, we want VMware Cloud and AWS to go to every one of the AWS regions all over the world. And fundamentally, it's up to you all to tell us which ones you want us to prioritize. Right? We can go do any of them. It's really a question of which one we do first. And so it's totally based on customer input. So if you want a certain region, please do speak up. Please let us know which ones are highest priority for you, and we can adjust accordingly. Now, as we think about enabling all these different regions, obviously a big aspect there is making sure we can enable connectivity to each of those regions, right? It's no good just to have the region by itself, but you're not able to connect your on-prem data center there. So as I mentioned, we support Direct Connect, and we're doing a bunch of work there to support not just management traffic of vCenter and migrating VMs, but also the VM workloads themselves. This is kind of your default option. I mean, does everyone here use Direct Connect, I would assume? Show of hands. Okay, a few people. Some actually less than I thought, or maybe you're too tired to raise your hand now. It's a long day. Irrespective, Direct Connect support is there. We've integrated with that. It works great. However, there are some cases where some folks here may not have it, or you may have some sites that don't have it enabled yet. And so in those cases, if those sites are connected to the internet, we want to be able to allow you to leverage those existing internet connections. And so you can kick in the NSX VPN technology there to provide that secure connection from your on-premises data center up to the cloud. So really it's just about giving you options and doing what's best for you in those environments. So that's the global infrastructure part. Now, when we turn our attention to security, there's a few different aspects of security. The first one of those is compliance. Right? So compliance is obviously a huge thing, critically important to so many of our customers. And we're working very closely between ourselves and AWS to make sure we can get as many compliance certifications as we can, as quickly as we can. So you can see all the ones there in the green box or the green dashed lines are all the ones that we've achieved thus far. We're working really closely on FedRAMP, really aggressively there. Want to get certified on that one. And of course, there's many more to come. Interestingly, each of us, VMware and AWS separately have way more certifications. It's really about bringing that certification process to our integrated technology of VMware Cloud and AWS. So a good start, but obviously still a lot of work to do there. Another aspect of security is, of course, networking. Now, I mentioned before how the SDC is isolated from a security perspective in terms of all the hosts are just your physical host. No one else can use them. And we also leverage the AWS VPC technology to isolate it from the network perspective. But within an SDC, many customers have told us they want to be able to run applications at different security levels, different compliance levels. And so how do you secure within an SDC and potentially across SDCs? This is where NSX comes in. So to this point, we've had some basic NSX capabilities in VMware Cloud and AWS, but now we're really unleashing the full value of it by supporting microsegmentation. So really, really critical value proposition for NSX is now available in VMware Cloud and AWS, meaning that if you have it on-prem, you can now start to use those same sorts of policies you have there and apply that to VMware Cloud and AWS, again, giving you that sort of consistent infrastructure and consistent capabilities, whether on-premises or in the cloud. So very cool stuff. The final part of security is really looking at visibility, right? Again, you want to secure stuff, but you also want to be continually watching to make sure that nothing bad's happening, right? Let's say, for instance, that some attacker gets access to one of your workloads in an SDDC on VMware Cloud and AWS. So they have access inside that VM, and now they may be reaching out via the network to other VMs to try and take over those other ones. So how can you know what's going on and potentially stop it? So the other thing we're doing with NSX is enabling a bunch of visibility. So we do something called port mirroring, which essentially allows you to snoop on the traffic of a given VM or other workload, and then export that information through something called IPFix. Essentially, it's just a standard way of exporting network traffic information to the many different network monitoring tools that are out there. So we have one called vRealize Network Insight. Many of the partners of ours, things like SolarWinds and so forth, also support this standard. It basically gives you the ability to really deeply introspect on the network activity that's happening within your SDDC. This is stuff your network teams already do today on premises, and now we're enabling that in the cloud as well. So it's really, again, about that consistency. How do you solve all those problems that you have for running a workload in production, ensuring security, and do that consistently both on-prem in the cloud? Again, that's the idea here. Okay, so that's security. So now let's talk about a fun one here, this notion of elasticity. How are we leveraging the benefits of the cloud to actually improve the capabilities that we can give you? Now, is everyone here familiar with DRS? Okay, so for those that aren't familiar, DRS stands for Distributed Resource Scheduling. It's a capability built into vSphere. And the basic idea is if you have a vSphere cluster, a set of ESX hosts, what DRS will do is look at all the VMs running across those ESX hosts and move them around so that they're most optimally placed for best performance, right? So you don't have one host that's so overloaded while all the other ones are doing nothing. Now, one of the limitations of DRS historically has been that if the cluster itself is just overloaded, there's just too many workloads there, there's nothing DRS can do about it, right? Because DRS has no way of calling an API to add more hosts. You can't do that on premises. So it's not necessarily a limitation of DRS per se, it's just a limitation of the whole model. But the cool thing about the cloud is that we can do this. So AWS has done something pretty phenomenal, in my opinion, and that is somehow automated reality, right? You can automate software. I haven't seen reality automated that often. So now we can call an API, and all of a sudden a new physical host appears connected to the network. Where this physical host comes from or how it happens, I don't know, but somehow it all happens automatically. Maybe Sandy can give us the details on those magic incantations. But now the point is that DRS now has an API it can call to get additional hosts. So this is really cool. So now DRS, we've actually expanded it to take a look at that cluster and say, is the cluster overloaded? If it is, I can actually add more hosts and reduce that load. So let's take a look at this here. So in this use case here, everything's green, we're all good. We got 6 hosts, everything's fine. But now let's say we add some workloads. And of course, because we add these workloads, it pushes compute, a CPU and memory into the red. So now we're overloaded from a whole cluster perspective. DRS can move things around, but it's not really going to help. So Elastic DRS says, hey, you know what? We actually need to add an additional host. So this new green host at the bottom there comes online. And when it comes online, it returns all these thresholds back to the green area because of the fact there's additional capacity. So now these workloads can be rebalanced, and they can all run within their maximal performance guarantees. So that's awesome, right? Elastic DRS can do that automatically. And as a matter of fact, if later on, let's say some of the workloads slow down, there's less demand, or maybe some of them are powered off, and Elastic DRS will notice, hey, we actually have too much capacity. It can then take away those added hosts. So this is all managed by policy. You basically say, OK, here's the range of a size I want. Maybe my cluster needs to be a minimum of 4 hosts, but a maximum of 8. I don't want to pay for more than 8, right? Even more specifically than that, you can get in there and say how aggressive you want Elastic DRS to be. If you're really performance conscious, you can say, the moment you see any sort of performance issue happening, even the slightest hint, add another host. I'm willing to pay that extra money because I want best performance. Or you can say, you know what, dial it back a bit. I want this thing to get into the red and be there for a little while before you add a host because I'm more cost conscious. So again, that's kind of an SLA that you can play with there. So really, really cool technology. This is just not doable on premises, right? So it's taking this really cool technology that we have with AWS and combining that and extending cool, the cool VMware technology. So in that same vein, there's another technology, another capability called stretched clusters. Now, you have a vSphere cluster. Now, vSphere cluster consists of ESX hosts. And thus far, on VMware Cloud and AWS, these ESX hosts have all had to be in the same availability zone. So all in the same AZ. But what we can now support is this ability to actually stretch a vSphere cluster across AZs. So you can have some hosts in one AZ and some hosts in another, and those are all part of the same cluster. vSAN will intelligently move data back and forth between the two. DRS will also intelligently move workloads between the two. If you're familiar with how scheduling happens on an individual computer, this is similar to essentially NUMA architecture, right? Where you want to keep your workloads close to where their data is, and you only want to make moves across those two AZs when absolutely necessary. So DRS has been updated to be really intelligent there. Now, the cool thing, though, is that if you have one of the AZs go down, that means that our high availability technology, HA, treats that just as a host failure, a set of hosts, right? 3 of your hosts go down. Turns out it's a whole AZ, but HA says, well, I'll still restart those hosts restart those workloads on the hosts that are still good. And in this case, that would be maybe availability zone B. Now, you have this problem where you have all these workloads running on only half the capacity. Well, luckily, we have a solution for that. We just talked about Elastic DRS. So once you see an AZ failure, you have less hosts, but now Elastic DRS can kick in to add the additional hosts so you can get back to full performance. And then at some point when AZ-A comes back online, DRS will rebalance, move all those workloads back, and Elastic DRS will reduce the number of hosts running on AZ-B. So really, really cool stuff, right? And you can start to see this notion of how all the elasticity of AWS plus the power of the VMware technologies can do pretty incredible things. In this particular case, what we've actually enabled is high availability across AZs without any application modification whatsoever. No re-architecture, no changes. All apps are now immune to AZ failures, right? They can be automatically restarted very quickly. So really cool stuff. It just goes to show some of the power of this partnership here. Now, another aspect that we're maniacally focused on is making this service as easy as possible to consume. So the default configuration for an SDDC, as I mentioned, is 4 nodes, so 4 ESX hosts. And that gives you kind of the full power of that SDDC. And that's great, but some customers have told us, hey, you know what, we don't need the full power yet. Right? We're just giving this thing a try. We want to do a quick and easy POC. How can you make it as easy as possible for us to get onboarded? So that's why we've introduced what we call the single node SDDC option. And so in this model, you only have one ESX host that comprises the SDDC. Now, obviously, this means you don't get all the cool bells and whistles. vSAN doesn't do much since there's only one host. NSX is less interesting. There's no vMotion, these sorts of things. But you can test out how do the apps run, how can you connect back to your on-premises environment, how can you migrate apps, and do all that sort of basic testing of capabilities, proof of concepts. And the nice thing about it is that the price as well. It's like much cheaper, obviously, than a 4-host cluster. In fact, due to some of the promotions we have right now, it's actually cheaper than a fourth of the cost of a 4-host cluster. So some really cool things, super easy to get started with. And as a matter of fact, whoops, looks like this URL got cut off a little bit here. I got overzealous on how big I made it. But I'll read it out to you. So if you go to cloud.vmware.com/VMware-AWS/single-host-access, that's what it says at the bottom there, host-access. If you go to that URL right now, you can pull out your credit card and get a new SDDC spun up, right? Super simple, super easy to get started and start playing with the technology. So strongly recommend, strongly encourage you to go try it out, play with it. Again, super easy, and you can start proving out the value today. The final section is really around how do we support all the different applications that you have in your environment. Now, I don't have a slide on this one, but I'll talk to it briefly. So one of the things we just announced recently was support for Horizon 7 on VMware Cloud on AWS. This is really important because it allows desktop workloads to be now run on VMware Cloud and AWS, just like all your server workloads can be. And this is pretty critical because if you look across, by the way, our Horizon product, for those that don't know, is basically a virtual desktop delivery product. So instead of having a full machine at someone's desk, they can have just a little thin client and connect to their desktop in the cloud. They can do it from their iPad or what have you. Now, if you look across our customer base, we have about 10 million of those desktops provisioned across our 500,000 customers. And obviously, a lot of customers say, hey, the same things I want to do to my server workloads, all the use cases Sandy was talking about, they want to do that to their desktops as well. So getting Horizon 7 was super critical. The other thing we did, beyond desktops, was also focus on these enterprise, critical, mission-critical workloads, and obviously Oracle being a key one of those. You look at things like Oracle RAC. Trying to figure out how to move that to the cloud has been fairly challenging in many different ways. The cool thing about VMware Cloud and AWS is that it really is an identical environment to what you have on premises, right? So same APIs, it's vSphere, it's the SDDC, same performance, same tooling, same licensing, all these things, right? You've already solved all those problems of running Oracle on VMware. Well, now you can do it Oracle on VMware in the cloud. That's the beauty of this. And so, pardon me. So we see a lot of customers looking at moving Oracle RAC to the cloud on VMware Cloud and AWS because of that simplicity. Again, leveraging all the great technologies we just talked about, you now get there for Oracle as well. So, really cool stuff. And that's just, again, a small sampling of all the new things that are happening here. Don't have time to go into more. OK, so let's bring Sandy back up to help us wrap this up. You want to take over on this slide, Sandy?
Yep, I will.
Oh, you want me? Yeah, it's cut off there. The bottom part says host-access. I'll have another slide in just a minute that has the same URL on it. Can I move it up? I guess we could, but we could edit it in real time. Should we do this? Let's see if we can see how much. Last time it crashed, and we didn't even do anything. So, whoops. Why does it not allow me to? That's weird.
Yeah, I think there's something.
Oh, I can,
because
enable
you have to
editing.
edit,
All right,
yeah.
we're going to abort that because the world might break.
But we will get it to you. We have a slide.
There's another slide
here
with
in
it.
just 1 second as well, right?
Yes. Well, we'll get the next slide has it on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is pretty exciting, don't you think? Yeah, I think this is really great. So if you look at what Kit and I just talked about, so the first thing that I think is really valuable is you've got that software-defined data center that's delivered as a cloud. So that's vSphere, vSAN, as well as NSX. So you've got that capability. So if you already have those skills, how many of you guys already have VMware skills in your shops? So you can just leverage those skills now because people are familiar with those VMware technologies. So you don't have to retrain, which I think is a big benefit. You also have extreme workload portability. So Kit talked about Oracle. I talked about Microsoft SQL Server. You've got all that portability as well that you can bring over. Very powerful solution. Again, you don't have to buy new hardware. You don't have to refactor. You can just migrate and go. And you saw the examples I gave where people were migrating 300, 400 VMs in 96 hours. So you've got all that power and speed together.
And this is, again, all happening on that fundamental AWS infrastructure. So I talked about how just the base infrastructure itself is enabling all sorts of cool capabilities in terms of elasticity, right? Being able to start up an entire SDDC in 90 minutes and add additional hosts in just a couple of minutes, right? That magic ability to add new physical hosts, as well as all the higher level AWS services and be able to connect that seamlessly into your environment. So when we look at how you're evolving, what's your application strategy going forward, this is a really key building block there because it allows you to take your existing apps, move them forward into the cloud, while at the same time evolving those applications architecture to use all these great AWS higher level services and connect them seamlessly with your existing services in VMware Cloud and AWS.
And I would say the top two services that we're seeing right now used are S3 and RDS being connected in. But we anticipate, as we have more and more and more use cases, and as these grow, you'll see more and more services as well.
Yep. And then in summary, so a ton of activity happening here. We've got a booth in the expo floor, so please go and check that out. There's really knowledgeable people there that can go as deep into the technology as you'd like, show you demos, all that sort of stuff. A bunch of URLs here. Again, the URL that got cut off before is here. So if you take nothing else away, I again sincerely encourage you to try out the single host SDDC. It's available now. You can swipe a credit card and get it going. The URL's there. Please go play with it, have fun, talk to us at the booth, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, and we'll stay around for questions as well. There's about 10 more minutes left for the session, so if you guys would like to come up and ask any questions, we'd love that as well. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope you try this out.
Thank you.